My wife was shocked when I invited her lover's wife to a backyard party. My revenge was brutal. Everyone shocked. Full story with updates. Hello. The day it all began was just like any other. A crisp Saturday morning in early fall. I had just finished mowing the lawn and came inside to grab a cold beer when I noticed my wife Lisa sitting on the couch, completely absorbed in her phone. She was giggling at something, her face illuminated by the screen. It wasn't the first time I'd seen her so engrossed, but something about her behavior felt off. Her laughter seemed too personal. She didn't even look up as I walked past her into the kitchen. I brushed it off at first. Lisa had always been friendly and outgoing, and I trusted her implicitly. But as the weeks passed, her behavior became harder to ignore. She was more secretive with her phone, guarding it like a treasure. She started working late more often, claiming that her company had taken on a big new project. I noticed her texting in the middle of the night, something she'd never done before. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. Lisa had gone upstairs to shower, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. I hesitated for a moment before picking up her phone. Her passcode hadn't changed. Her first mistake. What I found shattered me. A string of messages from someone named Brian filled the screen. My heart sank as I scrolled through the thread. The messages were flirtatious, peppered with inside jokes and references to late-night rendezvous. The latest text read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands shook as I kept scrolling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The dates and times lined up perfectly with her so-called work late nights. There were even pictures, selfies of them together, laughing in what looked like a hotel room. She didn't even have the decency to be subtle. The betrayal hit me harder than I thought possible. Lisa, the woman I'd loved and trusted for over a decade, was having an affair. My mind raced through a whirlwind of emotions, anger, heartbreak, disbelief. But most of all, I felt foolish. How had I missed the signs? How long had this been going on under my nose? I set the phone down just as I heard the water stop upstairs. My heart pounded as I forced myself to appear normal. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. I knew if I stormed in and accused her, she'd deny it, twist the narrative and somehow make me out to be the villain. No, I needed to be smart about this, methodical. That night, I barely slept. As Lisa lay beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind, I replayed the events of the past few months. The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The sudden late nights, her distant behavior, the phone she now kept glued to her side. I thought about Brian. Who was he? Did he have a family? Did he know I existed? The next morning, while Lisa was still asleep, I dove into research mode. It didn't take long to find out who Brian was. A quick search through Lisa's social media revealed him in a tagged photo at her company's holiday party last year. He was one of her CO workers, just as I suspected. Further digging revealed something I hadn't anticipated. Brian was married. His wife Karen was tagged in several of his photos along with 2 young kids. The discovery added a new layer to my pain but also sparked an idea. If Brian had a wife, that meant he had just as much to lose as Lisa. I felt an odd sense of vindication knowing I wasn't the only one being betrayed. For the rest of the day I couldn't shake the thought of Karen. Did she know what was happening? Had she noticed the same red flags I had? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to meet her. Not just to share my pain, but to plan something bigger, something that would make both Lisa and Brian regret every moment of their affair. By the time Lisa came home from her supposed errand run, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the passive, heartbroken husband. I was going to take control of the situation. The betrayal wouldn't destroy me, it would define me. And Lisa had no idea what was coming. The morning after discovering Lisa's affair, I woke up feeling strangely calm. The initial wave of devastation had subsided, replaced by a cold, calculated resolve. If she thought I would confront her with tears in my eyes and plead for an explanation, she had severely underestimated me. Lisa had betrayed me, and I would make sure she felt the weight of her choices. The best part? She wouldn't see it coming. First, I needed more information. It wasn't enough to know Brian's name and that he had a wife named Karen. I needed to understand who they were as a couple. If I was going to involve Karen, I couldn't approach her with half-baked suspicions. I spent hours combing through social media profiles, their posts a carefully curated facade of domestic bliss. Karen seemed like a devoted wife and mother, often posting photos of their kids' soccer games and family hikes. The contrast between her online persona and Brian's secret life disgusted me. Using Lisa's messages as my guide, I pieced together a rough timeline of their affair. It had been going on for at least 6 months, though I suspected it could be longer. The messages were littered with mentions of hotels and coded language. What angered me most wasn't just the betrayal, but the effort they had put into hiding it. The lengths they went to deceive me made my blood boil. Once I had a clear picture, I set my plan in motion. I decided to host a backyard gathering, a casual get-together with a twist. It had to appear completely normal, the kind of event Lisa would never question. I drafted a guest list that included our neighbors, a few of Lisa's KO workers excluding Brian, and most importantly Karen. Reaching out to Karen was the trickiest part. I couldn't exactly call her up and say, "Hi, I'm your husband's mistress's husband. Want to come over for a barbecue?" Instead, I sent her a polite message on Facebook, introducing myself as Lisa's husband. I explained that we were hosting a casual neighborhood gathering and wanted to invite her family. I mentioned that we had mutual acquaintances from Lisa's workplace, which wasn't entirely untrue. Karen responded graciously, thanking me for the invitation and confirming that she and Brian would attend. The moment I received her reply, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Step 1 was complete. Lisa, blissfully unaware, even helped me plan the event. She suggested recipes, picked up decorations, and chatted about how nice it would be to spend time with friends and coworkers. Watching her act so normal while I carried the weight of her betrayal only fueled my determination. I spent the next few days preparing meticulously. The gathering had to appear completely authentic. I mowed the lawn, set up outdoor lighting, and borrowed a large grill from a neighbor. The menu was simple but appealing: burgers, hot dogs, and a few side dishes. I wanted everything to feel unassuming, a picture-perfect suburban barbecue. As the day approached, I noticed Lisa growing a little uneasy. Perhaps she was sensing something, or maybe her guilt was bubbling to the surface. She asked if I had invited anyone from her work, and I casually mentioned a few names, omitting Brian's. Her face relaxed, and she smiled, clearly relieved. That moment cemented my resolve. She didn't suspect a thing. On the morning of the gathering, I made sure everything was in place. I double-checked the guest list, arranged the seating to maximize Karen's proximity to Lisa, and rehearsed the conversations I might have. Timing would be everything. My goal wasn't just to expose Lisa's affair but to orchestrate a scenario where both she and Brian were humiliated in front of Karen. I wanted them to feel the same sense of betrayal I had felt, but magnified by the presence of friends and neighbors. As I stood in the backyard surveying the setup, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Lisa had stolen something from me, but I wasn't going to let her keep it. By the time the sun set on that gathering, she would know exactly what it felt like to be blindsided, to have her world ripped apart in an instant. And when Karen walked through that gate, hand in hand with her husband, the first domino would fall. All I had to do was wait. The day of the backyard gathering dawned bright and warm, a perfect fall afternoon in the suburbs. I woke up early, partly because I had things to prepare, and partly because I couldn't sleep. My mind buzzed with nervous energy, going over every detail of my plan. Everything had to go off without a hitch. This wasn't just a barbecue, it was a carefully orchestrated reckoning. Lisa, oblivious to my scheming, spent the morning helping me. She arranged flowers for the tables and chatted about how nice it would be to see everyone. I watched her closely, searching for cracks in her facade, but if she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Her behavior only fueled my anger. How could she stand there smiling and laughing after what she had done? By noon, the backyard was ready. String lights crisscrossed overhead, the tables were set with casual centerpieces, and the grill was prepped. It looked like something out of a magazine, warm, inviting, and utterly deceptive. I'd invited about 15 people, a mix of neighbors, Lisa's Kio workers, and a few old friends. My heart raced as I thought about the final guests, Brian and Karen. Karen had texted me earlier that morning, thanking me again for the invite and confirming that they would be coming. I'd replied with a friendly "looking forward to seeing you both," as if this was nothing more than a neighborly gathering. The truth? I was counting down the minutes until they walked through the gate. As guests started arriving, I played the part of the gracious host. I handed out beers, flipped burgers, and chatted with the neighbors about football and local gossip. Lisa floated around the yard, laughing and mingling, completely unaware of the storm brewing just below the surface. Every time I looked at her, I felt a pang of anger. But I forced myself to stay calm. The time for confrontation wasn't yet. About an hour into the gathering, I spotted them. Brian and Karen entered the backyard, hand in hand with polite smiles on their faces. Brian looked like every suburban dad you'd see in a car commercial: khakis, polo shirt, confident stride. Karen, by contrast, was warm and unassuming, dressed sundress with her hair tied back. She seemed genuinely excited to meet new people, and I felt a pang of guilt knowing what was about to unfold. I greeted them with a wide smile, shaking Brian's hand firmly and giving Karen a friendly nod. Lisa was mid-conversation with one of our neighbors when she spotted them. Her expression froze for the briefest moment before she plastered on a fake smile and waved. I could see the panic in her eyes. Good, let her squirm. Brian's reaction was more controlled. He greeted Lisa casually, though I noticed he avoided her gaze for too long. Karen, oblivious, complimented the setup and commented on how nice it was to meet new people in the neighborhood. I ushered them toward a table near the center of the yard, ensuring they would be seated with people Lisa and Brian both knew. As the afternoon wore on, I worked to subtly steer the atmosphere. I made small talk with Karen, learning more about her and her family. She mentioned their kids, how they were involved in sports, and how Brian had been so busy with work lately. I nodded sympathetically, glancing at Brian, who was nervously nursing a beer. Lisa, meanwhile, looked like she was trying to hold it together, her laughter forced, her movements stiff. By the time dinner was served, the tension was palpable. I caught Lisa glancing at me repeatedly, as though trying to gauge whether I knew something. She was probably wondering why I'd invited Brian and Karen, but she didn't dare ask. I could almost see her thoughts racing. Did I know? Was it a coincidence? I let her simmer in her paranoia. At one point, I sat next to Karen and struck up a conversation about her hobbies. She mentioned painting, and I nodded, feigning interest. All the while, I could feel Lisa's eyes on us. She was sitting across the yard, engaged in a half-hearted conversation with a neighbor, but her attention was on me. She couldn't stand that I was talking to Karen, and it was delicious to watch her struggle to stay composed. As the sun began to set and the lights twinkled overhead, I knew it was time to take the next step. The stage was set. Everyone was relaxed, chatting and enjoying the food. Lisa and Brian were both visibly on edge, though neither dared to make a scene. Karen, still blissfully unaware, was laughing with one of the neighbors. I stood up, clinking my glass to get everyone's attention. I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight, I began, my voice steady. Lisa looked up sharply, her smile faltering. It's not often we get to gather like this, and I think it's so important to build a sense of community. I paused, locking eyes with Lisa for a split second before continuing. I also want to thank my wife Lisa for helping me put this together. And of course, a special welcome to Karen and Brian. It's so nice to have new faces here. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and Lisa looked like she might faint. Karen smiled warmly, unaware of the loaded subtext in my words. My heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through me. This was only the beginning. The real fireworks were yet to come. The backyard was buzzing with casual chatter as I watched my wife Lisa move through the crowd. She was smiling and laughing, though the stiffness in her movements betrayed her. The arrival of Brian and Karen had rattled her more than she wanted to let on. Every time she thought no one was watching, she darted nervous glances in my direction or toward Brian. She must have been dying to ask why they were here, but couldn't find the courage to confront me. Brian, for his part, was playing it cool, though his posture was tense. He avoided Lisa entirely, sticking close to Karen, who seemed completely at ease, laughing with the neighbors and commenting on how wonderful the setup was. It was almost painful to watch her. She had no idea her husband and Lisa were hiding an affair that could shatter her life. As the night settled in, the soft glow of string lights made everything feel oddly serene. But beneath the surface, the tension was electric. I moved between groups of guests, topping off drinks and making small talk, all while keeping an eye on Lisa and Brian. I wanted them to sweat, to wonder, to feel the same uncertainty and paranoia that had plagued me since the moment I discovered their betrayal. At one point, I caught Lisa cornering Brian near the drinks table. They were speaking in hushed tones, their faces close but not too close, trying to look casual but failing miserably. I took the opportunity to join them. "Everything okay over here?" I asked, my voice casual but laced with meaning. Lisa flinched as though I'd caught her doing something wrong. "Oh yes, just talking about work," she stammered, her eyes darting between me and Brian. Brian nodded, plastering on a weak smile. "Work, huh?" I said, crossing my arms. "You know, Brian, Lisa's been putting in a lot of late nights at work lately. She's mentioned how busy things have been." My words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Brian's face went pale, and Lisa's hand tightened around the glass she was holding. Karen wandered over before either of them could respond. "What are we talking about?" she asked cheerfully, slipping her arm through Brian's. Her presence only heightened the tension, and I couldn't suppress the flicker of satisfaction at seeing Lisa's shoulder stiffen. "Oh, just work stuff," I said smoothly, flashing Karen a friendly smile. "But you're lucky, Karen. You've got a husband who works hard and still makes time for family. That's rare these days." Brian coughed, nearly choking on his drink, while Lisa's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. Karen, completely oblivious, beamed. "Oh, Brian's amazing. I'm so lucky to have him." The words stung, not because they were directed at me, but because they reminded me of what Lisa used to say about our marriage, back when I thought it was solid. Before her affair gutted my trust, the evening wore on, and I continued to steer conversations to keep Lisa and Brian on edge. Every time they thought they could retreat into the crowd and avoid suspicion, I was there, hovering, listening, dropping subtle hints that only they would catch. At one point, I made sure to seat Karen next to Lisa during dessert, forcing them into proximity. Lisa barely touched her slice of pie, her hands trembling slightly as she made awkward small talk with Karen. Finally, as the gathering began to wind down, I knew it was time for the big reveal. The pieces were all in place, and the audience, our friends, neighbors, and co-workers, was primed. I had spent the night carefully planting seeds of doubt and curiosity, and now it was time to let the truth bloom. I cleared my throat, signaling for attention. "I just want to thank everyone again for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady. The crowd quieted, turning to face me. Lisa, seated near the center of the yard, looked like a deer caught in headlights. Brian, standing by the fence with Karen at his side, was gripping his beer bottle so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Hosting this gathering has been a reminder of how important honesty and trust are," I continued, letting my gaze linger on Lisa. "They're the foundation of any relationship, whether it's with friends, family, or most importantly your spouse." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lisa's mouth open slightly as though she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Brian shifted uncomfortably while Karen looked at me with a polite smile, clearly unsure where I was going with this. "And sometimes," I said, my voice hardening just enough for Lisa to notice, "we discover things that challenge that trust. Things that force us to reevaluate who we can rely on." The silence was deafening. Lisa's face had gone ghostly pale and Brian's knuckles were white. Karen, still oblivious, glanced around, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the final blow. "Lisa," I said, my tone sharp enough to cut glass, "do you want to tell everyone here about your late-night work meetings with Brian? Or should I?" The yard erupted into gasps and murmurs. Lisa's chair scraped against the concrete as she shot to her feet. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is." Karen looked between Lisa and Brian. Confusion and alarm etched on her face. "What is he talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising. Brian opened his mouth but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. "I'm talking about the affair," I said, my voice steady despite the anger surging through me. "The one you've been having with my wife for months. I have the texts, the photos, everything." Karen's face crumpled as the realization hit her. "Brian," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The yard was dead silent, every eye on the four of us. Lisa looked like she might faint, while Brian's shoulders slumped into feet. I could see the horror in their faces, the dawning realization that their secret was out and their lives would never be the same. I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold. Lisa had wanted to play games, but now she was the one who had lost. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had won. The air in the backyard was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. Everyone had gone silent, their gazes darting between Lisa, Brian, and me. Karen stood frozen, her face pale and stricken. Lisa, however, looked like she was desperately calculating a way to salvage the moment. But there was no way out. "Let me explain," Lisa stammered, stepping forward, her voice trembling. Her eyes darted to me, then to Karen, and finally to the stunned faces of our neighbors and friends. "Explain," I snapped, my voice sharp and cutting. "What exactly is there to explain, Lisa? The secret texts? The late-night meetings? The hotel room selfies? Or maybe the 6 months of lying to me and making me feel like a fool?" Lisa's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Karen, meanwhile, had turned to Brian, her expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Tell me he's lying. Tell me this isn't real." Brian shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair as if that would somehow help him find the right words. "Karen the first," he hesitated, his voice weak and pleading. "It's not what it seems." Karen's face twisted in anger. "Not what it seems. Are you seriously going to try to gaslight me right now?" After what he just said, she jabbed a finger in my direction. Brian glanced around at the crowd, his face red with humiliation. "Can we not do this here?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible. "Oh no, Brian," I said loudly, stepping forward. "We're doing this exactly here. You didn't care about discretion when you were sneaking around with my wife, so why should you get privacy now?" The murmurs among the guests grew louder. A few neighbors exchanged glances, some whispering to each other, clearly relishing the drama that had erupted right in front of them. Others looked uncomfortable, as though they wanted to leave but didn't want to miss what would happen next. Karen's hands were shaking as she stepped closer to Brian. "You cheated on me. With her." She pointed at Lisa, her voice rising with each word. "After everything I've done for this family, after all the sacrifices I've made for you." Lisa opened her mouth again, desperate to interject. "Karen, please, don't you dare," Karen snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare try to justify this. I trusted you. You came into my home, smiled at my children, and all the while you were sleeping with my husband? Do you even realize what you've done?" Lisa looked on the verge of tears, but no one came to her defense. She glanced at the guests, hoping for some form of sympathy, but all she received were cold stares. Whatever goodwill she had built in our social circle evaporated in an instant. I stood there silently, letting Karen's fury take center stage. It was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. Watching Lisa squirm and struggle under the weight of her own actions felt like justice. She had made her bed, and now she was being forced to lie in it publicly. The neighbors began to mutter louder now, some openly discussing what they had just learned. "Did you know?" one woman whispered to her husband. "I had no idea. I thought they were such a perfect couple." Lisa finally turned to me, her voice trembling. "James, please, let's talk about this privately. We can fix this." "I can fix this," I interrupted, laughing bitterly. "Lisa, you can't even admit what you've done. Fixing this? That's not even on the table anymore. What you did was unforgivable." Karen, her tears now streaming down her face, grabbed her purse. "I can't believe this," she muttered, her voice breaking. "I trusted you, Brian. I trusted you, and you've destroyed everything." She turned on her heel and stormed out of the yard. Brian called after her, but she didn't stop. "I'm sorry." The gate slammed behind her, the sound echoing in the stunned silence that followed. Brian stood there awkwardly, his face red with embarrassment and shame. "I should, go," he mumbled, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Yeah," I said coldly. "You should." As he shuffled out of the yard, Lisa stood frozen, her eyes wide and her cheeks streaked with tears. She was alone now, the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The whispers among the guests grew louder, their judgment palpable. "Well," I said, turning back to the crowd, "thanks for coming, everyone. I think we're done here." One by one, the neighbors and friends began to leave, some offering me awkward pats on the shoulder or murmuring their condolences. No one looked at Lisa. No one offered her comfort. By the time the yard was empty, it was just the two of us. Lisa stood by the table, her arms wrapped around herself. "James," she whispered, her voice small, "please? We can talk about this." I cut her off, my voice cold and final. "No, Lisa, we're done. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences." I turned and walked inside, leaving her standing there in the dark. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. This wasn't the end I had envisioned for our marriage, but it was the one she had earned. And for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt like I could breathe again. The house was eerily quiet that night. Lisa stayed outside long after everyone had left, probably trying to gather herself. I didn't care. I locked the door behind me and went upstairs to our bedroom. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Nothing in this house did. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the life we had built together, a life she had shattered in pursuit of something cheap and fleeting. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the floor, the events of the evening playing over and over in my mind. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated even, and to some extent I did. Lisa had been exposed, her web of lies unraveled in the most public way possible, but now that the dust was settling, a deep, aching emptiness crept in. I had loved her once, trusted her completely. That trust was gone, and with it, the foundation of everything we had shared. Lisa finally came inside a couple of hours later. Her footsteps were hesitant, and she didn't come upstairs right away. I could hear her in the kitchen, probably pacing or nursing a drink. I knew she'd come eventually, that she wouldn't be able to resist trying to fix things. But I was done. When she finally appeared in the doorway, her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked at me like a child who had been caught stealing, equal parts ashamed and desperate. "James," she began, her voice hoarse, "I know I hurt you. I know I've made a terrible mistake. Can we talk about this, please?" I stared at her, my expression blank. "Talk about what, Lisa? About how you lied to me? About how you threw away our marriage for some fling? What exactly is there left to say?" She stepped closer, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. I wasn't thinking clearly. "It was stupid, James. I swear it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A 6-month affair isn't a mistake, Lisa. It's a series of deliberate choices. Choices that you made over and over again, knowing exactly what you were doing." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "I was lonely," she whispered, as though that would justify everything. "We'd grown so distant, James. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore." "Lonely," I repeated, incredulous. "And your solution was to destroy everything we've built? To betray me with someone else's husband? You didn't just hurt me, Lisa. You hurt Karen, their kids, and everyone who believed in us." She broke down then, collapsing into a chair and burying her face in her hands. "I know," she sobbed. "I know I ruined everything, but I can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on us, please." For a moment, I felt a pang of pity. She looked so small, so broken. But I reminded myself that this wasn't about her pain. It was about mine, the betrayal, the humiliation, the months of deceit. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You made it clear what I meant to you when you started sneaking around with Brian. That's not a mistake, Lisa. That's who you are, and I can't be with someone like that." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I stood up, grabbed a pillow and blanket from the bed, and headed toward the guest room. "You can sleep here tonight," I said, not looking back. "We'll figure out the logistics in the morning." The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and awkward conversations with friends and family. Word of the backyard gathering spread quickly, and it didn't take long for the entire neighborhood to learn about Lisa's affair. Our friends, once close-knit, began to distance themselves from her. Karen, understandably, cut all ties with Lisa and filed for divorce from Brian almost immediately. The ripple effect of their betrayal was far-reaching, affecting not just them but everyone around them. Lisa tried to salvage her reputation, but it was a losing battle. She moved out of the house within a month, taking only what she could carry. The silence she left behind was deafening, but it was also a relief. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. Karen and I spoke a few times in the aftermath, mostly to exchange information about the affair and to commiserate. She was heartbroken, understandably so, but also fiercely determined to move forward for the sake of her kids. I admired her strength and found some solace in knowing I wasn't alone in my pain. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life. The house, once a reminder of betrayal, became my sanctuary. I painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and threw myself into hobbies I had neglected for years. The process was slow, but with every step I felt a little lighter. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, I reflected on everything that had happened. Lisa's betrayal had shattered me, but it had also forced me to reevaluate my life. I realized I had been living on autopilot, ignoring the cracks in our relationship because it was easier than facing them. In a strange way, her infidelity had freed me, not just from her, but from the complacency that had crept into my life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I raised my bottle in a silent toast. To the truth, no matter how painful, to new beginnings, and to the peace that comes from knowing I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button.